Hello, today we're going to be speaking with Shawn Dakin, the Director of Technology at Newcomerstown, Ohio. So Shawn, welcome to our tete-a-tete.
Hello.
Hello. So the topic we're going to look at today is going to be around classroom connectivity. We're going to be looking at how your district has been coping with kind of this growing demand for online learning pre-pandemic and now post-pandemic, because COVID's obviously had an impact on e-learning in the classroom. So first up, I think a good place to start is if you could just tell us a little bit about your district. How long have you been there? Where are you guys located?
Okay, so I've been with the district for 22 years now. Started right out of college in the district, actually graduated high school from this district, and
Nice.
Job opened up and I returned. Never planned to do that, but ended up back here. We're a very small district in southeastern Ohio. We're considered to be Appalachia, Ohio, so one of the poorer areas of the state. We have about 1,000 students in the district, and we've grown quite a bit since I started. Whenever I started, we had 2 labs of 40 computers 20 some years ago. And now we are 1-to-1 K through 12. So every student has a computer in their hand. Every teacher has at least 2 laptops, one to take home and one for their classroom that they carry around during the day. So yeah, quite a bit of the change over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a story that we've seen in a lot of different parts of the US. Over the last 20 years, we've seen this transformation in the way that schools have adopted online learning and also rolled out one-to-one schemes. So obviously, whether you're kind of a bit more rural or a bit more urban, that happens at a different pace, I think. But it sounds like you guys have really ramped things up in the last 20 years.
Yeah, definitely.
So what is your role as the Director of Technology involve? How has that changed since you first?
Well, so starting out, technology was kind of considered to be a side department. We were more of a support department, and now I have a seat on the administrative team. I sit with the principals once a week. I've joked before that I'm kind of like the digital principal at times. I have oversight over everything technology. And of course, technology's in every classroom. Every teacher is online every class period. With COVID, we're still having students that are getting quarantined. So those students are going home. So I have teachers that are hybrid. So they're teaching in the classroom with students in front of them and students that are at home on a device. And we're doing that simultaneously now. So that's become a challenge, but that's something that we see in our department and make sure that works every day.
That's really interesting, especially around the kind of hybrid side of things. How did you guys cope with adapting to that? Because I think the pandemic, it kind of hit everybody a little bit by surprise in a way. I don't think anybody expected it would be a whole online learning from home kind of hybrid model. How did you guys cope with that?
Well, it was an interesting change because we are in a rural portion of Ohio. Internet connectivity here is very limited. So a good chunk of my students do not have internet at home or didn't have internet access at home. So when we decided to shut down and actually start having full online classes and then moving to this hybrid scheme, we had 2 challenges. One, making sure we had enough bandwidth to carry on the daily activity and connect to those students at our home, and then also getting those students at home connected. I partnered with a cell service provider who happened to be updating a couple towers in our area, and they were able to cover all but I think a dozen of my students. And then we ended up putting repeaters in their houses to make sure that they could get connectivity. It's pretty poor connectivity, but it was enough to make us, make the connection and get the classroom working. So that's what we've done. And then unlike other classroom or other school districts in our area, we are running your CACHEBOX product. And so whenever we had to turn up and go, we were originally 1-to-1 6 through 12. And when the pandemic hit, we pulled the other 6 grade levels online. And a lot of the surrounding school districts were scrambling to get bandwidth. And I didn't have to do that with our CACHEBOX. That took up the bulk of the connection. There again, because so many of those connections are repetitive, there's no sense in making that call over the line multiple times. So we're seeing a lot of speed increase through that, and we're seeing that we didn't have to purchase any connectivity. And to give you a side-by-side, literally the district down the road from us, they're a little bigger than us. They're about 1,800 students, but they run 3 gig connection, and we run 200 meg, and I have no bottlenecks at all.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And I think, I mean, obviously we see it kind of frontline, that you get so many requests in the classroom for the same content that it's almost wasteful to upgrade your bandwidth just for the peaks in demand. So the more that you can serve locally, whilst reassuring you that it's still up-to-date content, obviously that's kind of more efficient.
Yeah, and especially at the elementary level, when I brought the K through 5 classes online, all of that stuff is repetitive. Those kids are all being guided through the project, and so they're all doing exactly the same thing in the classroom. And so that frees up that bandwidth for the teacher who is zooming out to the student that's home. That keeps that connection up, while those kids, I've got 20 kids sitting in the classroom, all going to the same site, following along with the teacher. They're not consuming all that bandwidth and taking the teacher's Zoom off. So that works really well for us. Makes
sense. It makes a lot of sense. So how frequently have you had to upgrade your bandwidth in the last, say, 5 years? I mean, obviously you've brought in a lot more devices in more recent times.
0. I have not upgraded in 5 years.
Wow.
This was a decision we made at the time, looking at the cost. We were going to go up to 500 meg 5 years ago. And I compared that to caching system, and the initial cost first year was pretty much a wash. But over the years, I figured, well, if we can do this and not upgrade, we'll save money. And so that was kind of the deal we made. And if I got above 80% of my capacity, I was going to upgrade. And we've been floating this year about 70-75 capacity.
Wow.
So we're still there. This next E-rate cycle, we're going to bring it up to 500 and update our CACHEBOX also, just because, I want to be forward thinking and look down the road, and there's definitely going to be more bandwidth demands as we go forward. But I'm pretty happy that, we've saved quite a bit of money over that period of time for not upgrading.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If you avoid those bandwidth upgrades that are a monthly cost, obviously that's going to help. And I am interested to kind of understand how you envisage technology in the classroom changing in the future, but it's something I'm going to pick up on just after asking you a little bit more about what content in particular when it comes to caching, because you mentioned about how this is helping you save bandwidth and stay at your existing connection for longer. So what type of content do you find is the most useful in terms of caching?
Okay, so the biggest savings I'm seeing are on our online textbooks. We've purchased several online textbooks, especially now that we're one-to-one. My curriculum department has decided that they're not going to purchase any hard books anymore at all. So everything is software. Yeah. So all but one of those products play very well with cache. One of them does not. So we had to pull that out. But that's how it goes. Yeah. But the rest of them, there again, it's a textbook. So it's the same material getting pulled, and it's the same material getting pulled period after period after period. So that works really well for us. And then also YouTube videos. Teachers are assigning YouTube videos. Watch this one, and then write something in Google Drive. So that works really well. As far as and that was one of the things that was nice to see grow over time. Because when we started, I was hoping to see more out of the YouTube videos, and the caching percentage wasn't quite where I wanted it to be. And over time, we've gotten that to a pretty nice area. So I'm pretty happy with that now.
Oh, brilliant. That's great to hear. Because obviously the web is constantly changing. So, it's important to kind of keep up to date. We have teams of developers and engineers who are constantly updating our web profiles to make sure that content is ever more cacheable. And, a few years ago, things like YouTube moved over to HTTPS, which made it much harder to kind of cache that with other caching options. But, we've kind of adapted because we're very education focused. And I think the reality is that there's so many benefits to using YouTube content in the classroom. There's so many educational benefits to it that, you know, that we really had to adapt the solution to meet those needs. So do have you noticed your teachers using more content since COVID?
Oh, definitely. I mean, our list of, so I have a list of all the content that we subscribe to and then what I see come over the network. And just this year alone, I rostered 55, 57, something like that products. So that's rostering students into the product. The year before COVID, we only did like 7. So we've added a lot of new products that we are rostering students into. Yeah.
And what kind of content are you seeing is becoming more and more popular nowadays?
A lot more online evaluation and remediation. So IXL, products like that the students go through and take some type of evaluation and then get assigned some type of a remediative assignment so that they can go through and practice what they don't quite understand.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so that's all kind of a little bit about how teachers are using more and more. You know, what challenges do you think are the biggest challenges that you envisage for the future with this growing demand?
Well, one is the fact that we're seeing more and more variation on products. And so the more variation I see, obviously, the harder it is to get that product cached. And so that's an issue. I'm also seeing more and more things such as augmented reality products where students are starting to look at handheld devices and you know, using that handheld device for some type of augmented reality in the classroom. And those are bandwidth hogs. And so that's definitely going to be a challenge to me. And I'm not sure where that's going to fit in the future and what that's going to look like. And then we're already starting to update our Wi-Fi with the consideration of 4 devices per student. You know, right now we consider each student having 1 device. In the next 5 years, I really anticipate each student having at least 4 to 5 connected devices on them during the school day. Don't know what all those will be. I can think of a few, but I think that's definitely going to be where things change. Instead of having, you know, a 1-to-1, we're going to end up with 2, 3, 4-to-1, where a student's not going to just have a Chromebook or a laptop or whatever, but they're going to have multiple devices that are on the network with them.
Yeah, I think that's a realistic view of the future in many ways with the way things are going, and you know, we are seeing more kind of innovative technologies emerging in terms of ed tech. So do you envisage that in the next 5 years, 10 years, longer?
Yeah, I think that's about a 5-year, within the next 5 years, that's where we're going to be at. And like I said, that's kind of why I'm looking at a bandwidth upgrade at this point and trying to figure out what am I going to need? What can I get away with? In our area, bandwidth is expensive. So I'm trying to figure out, I don't really want to continue to do upgrades. So I'm going to try to do this one shot with this next E-rate round, and we'll see where we go.
Yeah, makes sense. So that's kind of the way that things are going in general. Is that the way you see things happening in your school district in particular? You know, what are your kind of e-learning plans for the kind of coming years?
No, I think that's where we're going. I like to think we're kind of bleeding edge in our area. I've been known to throw things out there that probably were a little ahead of their time, and we've fallen flat a couple times. But yeah, we try to run out in front on things, and so I definitely see that's where we're going to.
Wow, that's really interesting. So in terms of your investments in technology, because obviously, you know, you're quite forward thinking, you guys are pretty advanced in terms of what you're using, especially in a rural area that has relatively limited and expensive connectivity. What do you think investments in technology have been the most valuable for students?
Well, the one-to-one device, you know, at this point, putting a device in each of those students' hands, that's been the most valuable thing we've done. And then apart from that, providing some type of internet in their homes. I'm looking at the possibility of actually providing internet to our students, hub back through us at some point. Starting to get cues from the government that might be what they want us to do. And if that happens, we're going to kind of become an internet provider. So that would be great value to our students. I'm not sure that that's really where we belong, but our students desperately need bandwidth. And that's the biggest thing at this point that would really impact education.
And do you think any of that will change in the coming years? You know, the availability of bandwidth in your kind of region, in your area?
Well, I would hope so. We actually had an initiative a few years ago where they came through and put fiber in all of rural Ohio, but there was no foresight on actually lighting the fiber. So we have a lot of dark fiber running through our communities that can't be used. So I'm hoping at some point someone in the Ohio government will see, hey, it would be good to allow these students to actually get on this connectivity that's out there. And there are a couple initiatives out there to provide broadband in those areas. But it came back to politicians not understanding that providing fiber did not actually provide connectivity.
So it's kind of, it's not really a top priority on the agenda.
They talk about it a lot, but I don't see it happening in the next 5 years. So.
Yeah. And I guess it's having that understanding and that kind of, you know, the understanding of how it works on the ground as well. Okay. Now, what do you think would make the biggest difference? I mean, do you still experience challenges today in the classroom in terms of connectivity?
All the time. From originally building out our Wi-Fi network for capacity, not density, and then suddenly throwing a bunch of devices in classrooms and having very dense connections. That was a big challenge immediately of trying to rearrange our Wi-Fi connections to make sure that students could get in where they were at. And it wasn't like one or two kids in the classroom that decided to open up a Chromebook, but no, now we're having 25 or 30. That was a change. And so now building out in the future, like I said, looking at more devices per student, obviously higher density, higher capacity. Those are definitely changes I'm seeing. Student populations moving into physical building. That's a challenge that we see just from time of year to a different time of year, whether or not band is being held in one classroom or outside. All of a sudden the kids that are on the outside of the building are sitting out there with their Chromebooks looking up their music, and they need a bunch more connectivity all of a sudden that we didn't even know about. Those kind of things catch us.
Do you think it'll ever change? Do you think we're always going to have this need for more and more bandwidth?
Yeah, I don't see it. I don't see it slowing down. And when I started, we were excited to have 2 T1 lines in our buildings, and now we can't even run a SIP phone over it. So yeah, that's big change over the years, and I definitely think that we're just going to keep going and going and going.
And does this change? Does this, obviously you've been in a kind of technology capacity in education for a long time. Has it been exciting watching the way technology's evolved? Are you excited for the future?
Yeah, I love it. The fact that I'm working with the kids and I get to be the first one to present them with what technology in industry looks like. Students are walking around with their cell phones at home or playing on their game consoles at home, but obviously an enterprise environment is different. And so they're getting exposed to the first enterprise environment whenever they come into our school. And there's some exciting things that we can do because of multiple connections that you can't do at home. And so that's always been exciting for me to be able to offer to the kids some things here that they can't get at home. And it's funny because when the kids find out we run as little bandwidth as we do, I've got kids that have more bandwidth. If they live in the city, they have more bandwidth in their house than we have in our school.
Wow.
But we're doing more in the school than what they can pull off at their home. So they're like, well, Mr. Dakin, I don't understand how that works. And so going through that explanation of how how a corporate network works. Is that's always fun to me. I'm a network guy and an electronics guy, so I love getting into that with the kids. So.
Yeah, and it's nice when they take an interest like that, when they're actually thinking, what are the mechanics behind how I can access this content and how we're all connecting in this way. Because a lot of kids are kind of growing up with it nowadays, so it's nice to know that they're thinking about the magic behind the scenes.
But yeah, it's different to know how to use it and actually understand how it works. Yeah. And I always get a couple kids each year that I get to pull that back and show them how it works and get them in here ripping devices apart, setting up switches, doing things like that, and that's fun.
Yeah. Nice, that's awesome. So, what do you think the most important thing about e-learning is for children? What do you think the most valuable thing is about bringing more and more e-learning into the classroom?
The most valuable thing I've seen is, well, two things. Differentiation. So meaning that a student sitting in seat A and a student sitting in seat B can both be delivered the educational content that is at their level so that they can learn at their level. For so long, we had one teacher at the front of the room teaching to the entire classroom, and you had kids that were bored because they were far ahead, or you had kids that were not understanding because it was way over their head. Yeah. And now with e-learning, we're able to kind of throttle that learning back, even to adjust the reading level for some of the content down to the student. So say for a science class, this pops into my head, for a science class, and the student's trying to learn a science topic but can't read well. The student may understand the science but can't read well. We can actually, using e-learning, we can bring that content down to their reading level, present it to them, and that student can understand the concept without suffering because of their reading level. And that was a big deal for me because I grew up dyslexic. So I was fully capable of understanding a lot, but until college, reading was a real challenge to me. So seeing that with the kids, that's a big deal. So differentiation is a big deal. And then remediation. So like I said earlier, when we're using IXL and MAP and some other products that we evaluate the student and then present them with topics that give them practice on their weak points. That's a big deal too, because there's no sense in having a kid sit down and practice and review something they already know. Let's talk to them about something that they don't already understand. And e-learning is allowing us to do that. The movement with our teachers from a traditional classroom to a classroom that's a little bit more robust and a little bit more has more of the ability to adjust to the students has been a challenge. But it's fun. It's fun watching the teachers learn and do this, especially with the data that we can pull in and show the teacher, hey, these kids are showing this much growth now. When you were teaching this flat concept, your class was getting this amount of growth. But now that you're able to target and bring each of these kids up, your gifted kid that sat in the back of the room that normally would have been bored out of their mind is now getting an extra 4 years of growth sitting in your classroom. So that's awesome.
Absolutely. I think that adaptive side of e-learning is it's transformational. And as you say, there's a lot of kids who in the past would have been left behind because perhaps, the teacher was teaching it in a way that 20% of the kids really took it on board, but, it wasn't adaptive enough for students who were maybe different types of learners or needed that information fed to them in a different way. So the fact that I'm very passionate about the power of e-learning and what it can do. I think it's fantastic the way that it can allow people to adapt. But what you picked up on there as well is a common problem that I have spoke to a lot of tech directors about, which is the teachers actually adapting to e-learning. This transformation of teachers who have maybe used textbooks and whiteboards for 10 years, and now they're having to adapt to a whole new way of learning, a whole new system that lots of kids have actually grown up with in many ways. Lots of kids are kind of growing up very tech savvy. So it's very interesting to see how teachers are adapting. What do you think has did you experience any kind of reluctance from your teachers? Were they quite happy to embrace it? Or
leading up to COVID, like I said, I like to think I'm a little bit ahead of the curve on a lot of things, and leading up to COVID, we were pushing a lot of these concepts.
Yeah.
And buy-in was maybe a third of our staff. And then suddenly we shut down, and teachers are kind of put in a position where that's the only method of education is online. And that was interesting to see, because some of the ones that were more reluctant obviously got on board. We had some that desperately tried not to change, and now have come along. But it was nice actually having the pieces in place in the background, so that we could spin those things up immediately when we were asked for it. So we had those products available. We had the curriculum available. We had some of it we were paying for, and I was going, why are we paying for this? Nobody's using it. And then suddenly, everybody had to use it. And we're seeing, even though with COVID, we're seeing a dip in education because we had kids sitting at home for so long. We are still being able to track and see where after that dip, we are getting more growth on the rebound than we were getting on a normal year before. So that's good. We're just digging out of a hole.
Yeah, absolutely. But do you think that the teachers, since kind of picking up this technology, have they continued to embrace it now that they're back in the classroom, for example? Have they seen the benefits, or are they?
I would say I've got a handful that refuse to continue. However, like we said, we are hybrid. So whenever a student is home because they're COVID quarantined, they're still doing something online. And so that's still kind of dragging the teacher back into that. I'm kind of surprised. We've had some of the ones that were most reluctant up front. Once they got their online presence built, they've stuck with it, and that's how they teach their classroom now. And moving forward, that's where we're going to be. And that was obviously teachers, like you said, that have been here 20, 25 years. And I don't blame them. I mean, I've been here 20 years, and I like changing at a pace that I can agree with, not sudden change overnight. So,
Yeah, absolutely. No, that makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, I guess there's quite a lot of rural-ish districts that you work nearby.
Yes.
I mean, what advice would you give to people? If you're kind of a forward thinker and somebody who is obviously managing their bandwidth quite effectively, and you have all these e-learning plans, what advice would you give to fellow tech directors who are maybe in a slightly different position?
Okay. Well, actually, I am the tech administrative consultant for Muskingum Valley Educational Service Center, which covers, I believe, 14 or 15 school districts in Southern Ohio. So we meet about once a month, and we cover this exact kind of thing. So we've been talking a lot about both wasted bandwidth, where is all this going? And on the other side of that, security. That's the other big thing right now in our area, is trying to make sure that all of our student data, all of our financial data is secure. So those are the things that really are forefront right now when I'm talking with other tech coordinators in our monthly meeting, making sure that we are being as effective as we can, keeping our kids safe online, not just from filtering, but from data theft.
So you think they're the biggest kind of headaches for fellow tech directors that you speak to?
Yeah, right now that's the biggest. I would say that's the biggest fear, because we are seeing quite a few attacks on education, and I can see it in my network every day, where there are attempted attacks, and then there's surrounding districts who have actually been compromised and lost both money and data to hackers. So bad things happen. So it's on one side, we're worried about, can the kids connect? Can the kids get everything that they need? And on the other side, we're worried about, can we keep the bad guys out? So those are our biggest concerns right now. And that's the things that have really consumed our conversations whenever we meet in the last couple months.
And what's the source of most of these attacks? Where is the vulnerability in your networks?
I'd like to say there's no vulnerability in my network.
Well, not yours necessarily.
No, well, I mean, you see it everywhere. And so phishing attempts coming in through email, stuff like that. But then beyond that, we're starting to see actual physical mail phishing, where they're sending a letter to somebody saying, hey, this is up with say it's a financial issue, or it's a student transfer or something like that. Here's our school website. Go to this, type in this URL, which is obviously false. And so because people are filtering their email, right? And everybody's watching our email real close. So we're starting to see physically delivered attempts to direct staff members to go somewhere and allow somebody to access the data, right? And we've also had what they call vishing, which is voice phishing, where they are emulating a phone number. They'll call in, say they're one of our vendors, say that they didn't get a check, try to redirect checks, stuff like that. So it's not just technology, it's also training people to make sure we have policy in place. You follow the policy. There's policy for a reason. Don't just because you got a letter saying this kid transferred and you need to send their information someplace, make sure you follow the policy.
Absolutely. Wow, that's pretty scary, really.
Yeah. And sometimes I wonder, with the information they're after, I guess I'm not devious enough to know what exactly they're wanting to do with some of the information they're trying to attain. Yeah, so it's interesting to see.
Yeah, maybe it's one of those things we don't want to know so much.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of, I mean, you said that you guys are, you've been able to stay at your current connection for quite a while. How would you, so it's kind of a three-part question, really. So how do you describe your school's connectivity right now compared to the pre-pandemic connectivity, and then compared to when you first started? Because obviously your needs have changed, but how has the state of connectivity changed in that time as well for you guys?
Okay, well, I'll start way back. Like I said, when we started, we were running 2 T1 lines. So we were lucky to get email. At that point in time, connectivity to the outside world was simply transferring data. We did the exchange of files, and we did email. Obviously no video, anything like that. And then pre-pandemic, we were consuming a little over 50% of our bandwidth, and doing basically what we do now, but on a much smaller scale. We had some teachers doing online education. We had some teachers doing video and stuff. And then when we spun up with the pandemic and we added a bunch of these new products online, like I said, I could have seen a huge spike in our bandwidth if it wasn't for the fact that we're caching it. So those repetitive calls are getting reduced. And so we've gone up 15, maybe 20%. I can't remember from the last report I looked at. But we didn't, looking at it, we should have gone up multiple 4 or 5 fold, and we didn't. So that's really saved us. And like I said, looking at surrounding school districts where I'm talking to guys when I go to my meetings, when I'm consulting, I'm talking to guys that are adding, in the last 2 years, have added 2, 3, 1 gig lines for districts that aren't much bigger than us. And I look at the price, what they're paying, and think,
That's crazy. And is it just a knowledge visibility kind of thing, or is it just you stick with what like bandwidth upgrades were kind of something that we saw as 5 years ago or something? People would just reactively upgrade their bandwidth as and when they needed it, but now demand is growing so rapidly that people need something more than just bandwidth. They need a bandwidth management strategy in place, essentially.
In my consulting, I've talked to them about this. Obviously, we all go back. Well, most of our districts all go back to the same pipe, the ITC that we send all of our fiber back to. And so if you're wasting bandwidth down the road, you're wasting my bandwidth downstream.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this multiple times. And the biggest thing is it's what you're comfortable with, right? It's what you've always done in the past. And so these guys have always basically looked at, the only option was to upgrade bandwidth. And upgrading bandwidth is a sure thing. I'm adding this number. I need this much. I add this much to it. I now have this much. where caching is something that is a little bit mysterious to some people, I think. And it is hard to predict what gain you're going to get coming into it. You can run some numbers and get a guess, but to actually predict, okay, I'm going to get this much gain, so this is all the bandwidth I'm going to need. It's hard to do. And I've talked to a couple of districts who have jumped in and added a box in, and they're still tweaking them, trying to figure out what they're doing. And then I've also talked to our ITC about the idea of, hey, can we look at maybe doing this with all of our member districts? Just because, like I said, if guy down the street is buying a bunch of bandwidth and sucking it all up downstream, he's slowing me down. And I can't control that. So we've talked about that, but it's really much more about the understanding of hey, this will work. And I guess when it's your butt on the line and your superintendent saying, hey, why is our internet freezing every day? We're at 100% capacity. It's easier to say, okay, we're at 100%. I'm going to double it. And so we've got more space than to say, I'm going to buy this box and put it in and we're going to drop our percentage. That's a little harder to explain to people. So
no, it makes sense. And it is a kind of safe kind of go-to, I think, that people see as upgrading bandwidth. But yeah, as you say, kind of innovative tech directors like yourself, are going to look for alternative ways of maximizing their capacity rather than just relying on reactively upgrading your bandwidth, which ultimately, we've talked before about the more you have, the more you use. So you upgrade, everybody uses the internet more, it's fast for about 6 months, and then all of a sudden you're congested again. You're seeing big spikes in demand from bandwidth, from sort of device updates and YouTube and various other traffic. So
if you have more, you use more. It's just like money.
Exactly. we can all relate to that one.
Yeah.
So what do you think, where do you think the biggest driver in terms of this e-learning development is coming from? Obviously yourself, you're at the center of all of this, but where do you think the biggest drivers of adopting more and more e-learning and building this into the curriculum, where do you think that's coming from?
That's definitely from my curriculum directors and my principals. Getting buy-in from them, which we've gotten, and then our new curriculum director is very much pro e-learning, and she's done a great job of moving everybody that direction, trying to take away some of the crutches that people were using to prevent themselves from moving forwards and getting them on board, and that's great to have a partner in that department that will do that. And then she also does our grants. So she ties that to a lot of money, which is always good. If you can tell people, hey, if you do this, the district will get more money. She's been able to move us forward on quite a few different areas in curriculum, just by kind of doing a little bit of the carrot and stick idea that, here's a carrot, let's move forward before I have to hit you with the stick.
Yeah. But it's so important to have those relationships, where you've got the kind of instructional side of things and then you've got the technical side of things. Nowadays, the two really need to be working hand in hand. It's not a case of you've got a technical team who are working in silo and powering up the network. And if anything goes wrong, everybody just loses it. Nowadays, it's much more about IT kind of informing decisions at the very top of the district level. You're able to now kind of provide that data, as you were telling me before. You're able to actually demonstrate the impact of e-learning, which when you have a curriculum director or principals who really believe in e-learning, this is exactly the kind of materials they need to be able to push things forward. So it's very much working in partnership as a team, if you like.
Yeah. Well, and like I said, I like the structure we have here and we've built over the years. The fact that I'm at the table with the principals, and I have a pen in my hand that I check mark things, so if it doesn't get through our department, it doesn't get bought, or the project doesn't go forward. And that's that's rare, and I appreciate that my district gives me that, because I know other districts that I work with that don't have that input, and they're just simply the technical support department, and those districts suffer for that.
Yeah, exactly. And what do you think about one thing that we've kind of come across, because we've been working in this area for nearly 20 years now as well. So what do you think about the fact that, we've seen this growing demand that's accelerated even more in recent times, and yet tech teams generally haven't grown, especially not at the same rate. So you've got this demand that's basically outpacing the support that's available, the physical support that's available. How have you guys coped with that?
Well, we are a team of two, and we've been a team of two since I was hired 20 some years ago. Wow. I was originally hired as the assistant, so whenever my predecessor was actually the media center director, the library director for the district. And he bought a computer for the district and put it in the library. And so he knew something about computers, so he became the tech director. That was how that went back then. So then they hired me because I was technical, and that had electrical engineering background. And they said, okay, would you like to come back? I graduated from here, so would you like to come back and do this? Sure. So when he retired, I took his position and hired an assistant myself. And then that's how we've moved forward. We're still a two-man department. Whether we had 80 machines whenever we were back in the day to now having over 1,000 Chromebooks. But if you look at our network, we're about 3,800 nodes on our network. And I talked to my buddies that are in industry who run a small business network of 45 devices, and they have 3 people or 4 people in their department.
Injustice.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I think it's absolutely true, and it's something I see a lot whenever I ask people about how quickly has your tech team grown. Given that over the last 20 years we've seen an absolute transformation in demand, and it's very often the same story. So how have you guys coped with that? How have you been able to adapt to that?
We've moved to a lot more automation, a lot more cloud-based management. So I can manage things from about anywhere in the world now. So that makes a huge difference, cuts down on a lot of time. Moving to devices that require less maintenance, less physical maintenance, easier to repair, that kind of stuff. It's kind of in-house solutions. I think with every network, it's you have to find something that fits. And we've kind of found where our weak points were and automated those points out where we could, and move forward. But it's really, you have to be adaptive to your environment, and that's what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess if the tech teams haven't grown as much, the technology available has evolved, as you say, to become more automated, to become more intelligent, and give you kind of data-driven insights to know where in your network you need to concentrate on.
Yeah, well, and then there's offloaded costs too. I mean, where I could have an extra tech that could do repairs that would ultimately save us money. Instead of that, we make the choice to buy devices that are more disposable. So we're throwing money out rather than paying somebody to keep something going. So there's a trade-off there, and we've actually had that discussion before. Where is that trade-off? Can we actually enumerate that and show that? And where's the break-even point that we need to buy a new person? Right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But I guess those conversations, as you mentioned earlier, they're a lot easier to have when you're kind of on the board with, being one of the decision makers in the process. Okay, so I mean, the only other question I kind of had was, is there any particular EdTech news or any kind of stories that you'd like to share before we finish?
Boy, I don't know. I mean, we've talked quite a while. I don't know that there's anything I haven't said at this point. NFT is the way of the future. So I'm starting to look at NFTs and trying to educate some of our students on NFTs and creating their own NFT. And actually, my daughter's in high school and she's a bit of an artist, and so we're trying to move some of her photography and art into the digital realm and actually doing that as an NFT. And so I'm learning at that point, but also working with some of our kids and trying to get them to understand that, because the digital economy of the future with cryptocurrency and NFT is going to be a big thing. And I think our kids need to understand that. We need to get on that now. And it's way over my head at this point. I'm still learning it. But yeah, I think down the road, that's going to be the big thing. We need to make sure that we're preparing our kids for the new digital economy.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think school is a great place to start. You know, the younger they learn, the more adapted to it they'll become. But yeah, fantastic. Well, it's been amazing speaking to you, Shawn. Really interesting insights into your journey through this evolution of e-learning that is just like a roller coaster that's never stopping.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity.
Anytime. Thank you very much.